Hey, let's talk about baby sleep. I'm John from Fathercraft. There are a lot of myths and misconceptions about baby sleep out there. So that's why I'm talking to an expert about it. No, I'm not talking to myself. I'm talking to Dr. Jacqueline Winkelmann, aka Dr. Jacq. She's a board certified pediatrician who's a pediatric hospitalist and the former chief of staff at the Children's Hospital of Orange County. Dr. Jacq is currently the medical advisor at Miku, one of our favorite baby monitors. So we'd like to thank the team at Miku for making this conversation possible. You're going to hear Dr. Jaqq's expert advice for parents based on her many years as a pediatrician and as a mom of 2 kids.
Dr. Jacq, we'd love to ask you a few questions about baby sleep. You obviously think a lot about baby sleep, both as a pediatrician and as an advisor to Miku.
And as a mom.
Yes, all those things. What are some of the biggest misconceptions that new parents have about sleep and babies?
The biggest misconception about sleep and babies is that you can control it in any way, shape, or form. Babies are these mysterious little creatures that do not read books. However, we are the parents that read, and expect things to happen at a certain point in time and in a certain way. And I have gone through this personally as well.
So have I.
As a pediatrician, you still think that things are going to happen a certain way, and they do not.
There's this concept that we as parents can do something to help our babies or help our kids, whether it's in the short term or the long term, become great sleepers. Is that true? And if so, what should parents be thinking about and doing?
Yes, there are certain things that you can do to facilitate the process or to encourage it from happening. My top 3 are probably have a routine. Have a routine that leads up to nap time and bedtime. And this routine probably can start as soon as this baby gets home. It does not need to wait until the baby's 4 months and now you want the baby to be on a certain schedule because you're not driving around everywhere with this baby or whatever the case may be when they're super young and they just sleep, wherever and whenever. Start your routines early. And it means that you're going to sacrifice a little bit because you're probably not going to be so out and about, but having that, bath time, read your book, dim the lights type of situations, babies their brains are kind of programmable for that. So they will know that X, Y, and Z will lead to this outcome. And so having a routine from the beginning is huge. The second thing is consistency. Being consistent is very important, especially once you get to the point that you want this baby to be sleeping at a certain time or, going to sleep by him or herself. They're going to try to wear you down and you're just going to have to, be strong because you're doing it for their health and yours. And then the third thing that I think is really huge is putting your baby in his or her bed drowsy but not asleep. When you have a newborn and an infant that is always rocked to sleep or fed to sleep, and then all of a sudden when they're older and they're much more alert, you put them in their crib and they're still awake and they're like, wait, I've never been here when I'm awake. What is this? I don't, this is not flying. So, and I can tell you that it can mean that you feed your 2-month-old and then you wake them up a little before you put them in their crib. That's okay. I know we're like terrified of what happens when you wake up that baby that you finally got to sleep. But in the end, I think it'll be well worth it when they are self-sufficient. I know how to get myself to sleep kind of baby.
That is really good advice that I wouldn't have thought of after 2 kids.
Right.
As a parent, you thank your lucky stars that they fell asleep during feeding. So,
absolutely.
Are some babies just not good sleepers and others are naturally good sleepers?
I think that's more of how we see them than how they really are. And, we define them as good or bad. And for example, my daughter, when she was a baby, she never, ever napped for more than 45 minutes. Not when she was a tiny baby, not when she was a toddler. 45 minutes was it. Now, I needed her to nap longer than 45 minutes because I was studying for my boards. But she woke up and she was refreshed and she slept 12 hours at nighttime. And I considered her a bad napper. But Was she really? No, that's just what she needed. So I think the concept of good and bad sleepers are more how we define them than how they really are. Now, some babies do need to learn to, soothe themselves to go to sleep or to stay asleep at nighttime. That's a different story. But bad sleepers per se, I think, is just kind of what we want.
So basically we're projecting our needs onto our babies then?
Sleep is a hot commodity when you're a new parent. So yeah, and we read the book, and it said that my newborn's supposed to sleep 18 hours a day. And I was always like, no, not even close.
Yeah. So, I think that's such an important point, that we read these books and they said all of the things in the books are averages, and it's so easy to think, oh, my baby's not doing what the book said that they should do. But so your point is that every baby is an individual human and may be just different naturally.
Every baby, every toddler, every child, every adolescent is different. And even in medicine, I can tell you, we read the books, we read our medical textbooks, we read what symptoms are supposed to go with what disease, but that's not the case. The kids just don't read them. So they'll, it's always kind of a puzzle to put together, because each one of them will behave differently. And it's the same with, babies and sleep.
I'm glad to hear you say that about older kids, because my 3-year-old consistently stays up till 9 to 10, and I'm like, you are so weird.
Yeah. And and when you have more children, you can certainly tell, they're so different. Each one of them is so different. My daughter was going to bed at 6:30 when she was 3. 6:30 to 6:30, no one could wake that kid up. But then my son was like yours. He's more of a night owl, and he would stay up till 9, and he would sleep in a little later, and that seemed to satisfy him. And as long as they're, not super tired the next day, or, super cranky, once they're in school, their behavior's okay, their schoolwork's okay, then yes, just like with food, sleep is very individual. So some kids will need more, some kids will need less, and be just fine.
But again, the best way to figure that out is the consistency piece, right?
So getting enough sleep for parents is a constant and pretty real fear, I think. And one of the things that I think causes parents to get even less sleep is worrying about whether their baby is sleeping safely. Can you talk about how parents should they stop worrying about whether their child is sleeping safely, and what should they do to ensure that they're doing everything they can?
They shouldn't stop worrying, because they're not going to stop worrying about their kids until even after they leave their house. It's just part of the job description. We're going to worry. And, and safety and sleep, especially in a young infant, is a reasonable concern. We don't need to obsess over it, but there are things that we can control to make sure that your child is in a safe sleep environment. And that is probably the best thing we can do as parents. And there are certainly, long list of to-dos for safe sleep, but the simplest is what the AAP and all the other sleep foundations have called the ABCs of safe sleep. And A is for your baby sleeping alone. B is for your baby sleeping on their backs, which lots of research has shown that this is the safest way for your baby to sleep. Although an interesting tip I just learned is when your baby, with this back to sleep campaign, which has actually decreased the incidence of SIDS significantly, of sudden infant death syndrome, we have seen a lot more baby flat heads, right? Because their babies are on their backs all the time. So kind of an interesting tip that I never thought about is when you put your baby to sleep, especially when they're younger and their skulls are more malleable, that's when they usually get the flatness. Switch them from which side. Like, we tend to be so habitual and we put them always facing the same way. But when you switch them, they tend to turn their heads different way. And that way they won't get like one flat spot in one place. And then, of course, we always encourage as much as possible when they're awake and supervised to be on their tummy. And then the C for the ABCs is to be in their own crib. And that just means, a firm mattress, no pillows, no blankets, no stuffed animals, no bed sharing. And those are the safest things the things that we can do to keep our babies safe.
There's so much technology out there today, and some of it is really cool. Some of it is just seems like John described one baby monitor that we reviewed as having like a laser light show that made him feel like he was in a club. How do you think about, as a pediatrician, all of this technology around baby sleep? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? And how would you choose as a parent?
Yeah, I think the general feeling in the pediatric community is that there's just way too many baby gadgets, right? Not just for sleep, for everything. And I feel like some pediatricians might think that these companies are preying on these, anxious parents that think that they have to have all these things in order for their baby to sleep well or to grow well or to sit at the right time, or you name it, there's something for it. So my personal feelings about it are a little bit different. I feel like there's an array of options for you to choose from to make your lives a little easier. And, whatever seems appropriate, safe, and you can afford, more power to you. As far as the noise machines and light shows and musics and baby monitors, I think, it's important to keep some perspective. Do we need them? No. Did our parents do it without it? Yes. But I also don't need a glass of wine at the end of the day. I'm perfectly content having it. So, if there are things that are going to make your life as a parent, I mean, it's a tough job, especially those first few months. And then I can tell you 19 years later, things just get more complicated and differently difficult. But but those first few years are pretty intense. So yeah, whatever you can do to reassure you and to make your life a little easier, why not? Now, with that said, especially with the baby monitors and the smart monitors that measure oxygen levels and heart rates and respiratory rates and all these kind of more medical type technology, that's where I think there's more hesitation on the pediatrician world about what parents are doing with this information. My feeling with it, and especially with the Miku that does have some of this medical technology, is that it is great for parents to use for trending, for knowing what their child's baseline is. And we've actually done a few studies, and if that baseline deviates 25% or more, this may be something that you might want to bring to your healthcare provider and see if there's anything going on. Of course, it goes along with how your baby's acting, what's happening with symptomatology and other things. But at the same time, it's not for you to obsess over numbers. It's really just to find out what's normal for your child. Again, not necessarily comparing, with what the book says, but you will get to know your child with this little device over time.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought on the trends. I mean, I think people get caught up in numbers and again, comparing those to what they read in books and articles, but just focusing on your baby and localizing that number to your baby. If that's consistent, that's what's important.
Yeah, and I can tell you, I'm a hospital pediatrician, so all of our patients are hooked up to all kinds of machines. We don't take one single value for anything. It doesn't mean anything. It's about what's happened in the last 6 hours or what's happened in the last 12 hours and how are things changing one way or another. So even for us using them in a medical setting, we use them for trending.
Anything that we didn't ask that we should have today?
I think the bottom line is, to trust yourself as a mom and a dad, to know that you know your child best, to go with your gut feeling. The first thing I learned on my first day of pediatrics is listen to mom. I should say dad too, of course. But, listen to that parent instinct because they're rarely wrong. So no matter who's telling you what this monitor is saying, you have a different feeling about your child, you go with that. Even if you're a new parent, you will know.
Yeah, they're still pandering. Still got to stay home. Oh, thanks again to Dr. Jacq and Miku Baby Monitors for making this conversation possible. For more great free resources on baby sleep, head over to fathercraft.com/sleep.